Welcome back to the Struction Contractors channel. Okay, here's my step-by-step sourdough recipe. I've decided I'm going to make this as simple as humanly possible for anybody to follow and cook a sourdough loaf or bake a sourdough loaf in their own kitchen with the supplies you would commonly find in a residential kitchen. The 5 most important ingredients you're going to need for sourdough baking, in this order, are a cup of coffee for you to be drinking, an active sourdough starter, the brown and white bread flour of your choice, some salt and some water. You could make it with just white or just brown bread flour, but that's entirely up to you. I've recently been baking my sourdough loaves with a brown bread flour, which we get here in South Africa. It's Eureka Stone Mill brown bread flour, which I find gives me the best dough consistency, relatively easy to work with, and as a finished product it really is superb. So as I say, I've been watching a lot of YouTube channels lately trying to get my sourdough loaf down pat, and there's a lot of complicated talk about baking ratios and wet mixes and dry mixes in this flour and that flour, and I've tried to make it as easy as possible because the chances are, as a home baker, you're more likely than not going to be making this bread on a Saturday or Sunday. And the last thing you want to do is get halfway through this loaf and be hating what you're doing. It is a lengthy process. It does need quite a little bit of prep with regards to the starter and planning and all those sorts of things. So my idea was to keep it as easy as possible. So it's as simple as this. With brown bread flour, I use a 75% water to flour ratio. With white bread flour, I use a 65% water to flour ratio. With all my sourdough, I use a 32% sourdough starter to flour ratio and a 2% salt ratio. I have included a spreadsheet which makes it very easy to just plug in your starter and it'll calculate your flour, water and salt ratios necessary. For me, it's easier to measure my starter because that is my determining quantity normally, rather than my water or flour. So I put in my sourdough starter quantity and then it'll calculate all the rest of what I need for me. So here we go. Now that you've got your coffee ready, let's begin our sourdough process. The process is a relatively rigid one, but it works, and it works well, and it's not difficult as long as you are patient enough to do the variety of different steps over quite a lengthy period of time. As we are dealing with a naturally produced yeast, we need to give it a little bit more TLC, a little bit more time, but the end product is well worth it. So what I like to do is add my sourdough starter into a bowl. I've popped my bowl onto my electronic scale and I'm just measuring out relatively accurately my quantities. Popping in the starter, and then to that I'll add my water quantity and start stirring it slowly with my fingers just to incorporate the starter and water into a relatively fluid liquid. When you pop the water into the starter, you'll notice that a section of the starter floats. That's a good thing. There's such a thing as a float test, which gives you an indication as to whether your starter is or isn't active enough to produce a sourdough loaf. So if you've got a nice clump of your starter floating on your water, you're in a good place to start. Once you've mixed your starter and your water, it's time to add your flour combination. Now for this particular loaf, I'm going to be using brown bread flour alone, so I'm going to be using the 75% mix ratio. So once you've got all of your flour into your sourdough water mix, it's time to stir the whole lot up together. You could do this with your hands. It's quite sticky and messy. I've chosen to do it with a spoon. As I say, I'm trying to make this as easy as possible. All you need to do now is incorporate that whole lot together. Once the mixture is relatively well mixed, scrape down the side of the bowl, cover it with a tea towel and let it stand anywhere between 30 and 45 minutes. This process will hydrate the flour, which encourages the enzymes to begin the gluten development. You'll notice that I haven't added any salt to this point. Apparently it gets in the way of the hydration of the flour. Don't ask me to explain the science to you, it just gets in the way, alright? So I measure out my salt quantity, and then all I'm going to do is sprinkle it over the top of my dough mixture. Sprinkle the tiniest little bit of water onto it. While I'm doing this, I'm also wetting my hands, which discourages the flour from actually sticking to my hands. Once I've done that, I'll gently knead the salt into the flour. This should take around about 5 minutes. It shouldn't take very long. You'll feel the salt starting to dissolve into the flour. You'll start to feel it coming together quite nicely. It's quite tough, so at this point we're going to need to rest it. So cover it with a tea towel, and we're going to rest it for 3.5 hours. But intermittently we're going to be doing what they call a stretch and fold every 30 to 45 minutes. Again, here I lightly wet my hands just so that the dough doesn't stick, and all you do is slide your hand underneath the dough, pull it up, which is the stretch, and then fold it back over itself into the center. Once you've done that, rotate the bowl around until you've done it 3 or 4 times and all the dough has been stretched and folded. Then cover it up again and set it aside for another 45 minutes or so. I keep mine in the oven with only the light on to prove nicely. So once we've now left the bread to prove for 3.5 hours with the intermittent stretching and folding, it's time to shape it. For this loaf I'm going to be using a proving basket, which I got online from Crust and Crumb. But if you don't have one, you could just use any bowl or Pyrex dish, whatever you have at the ready in your kitchen. It does the same function. For this step, what I like to do is lightly dust my surface and then remove the dough from the bowl and start with the shaping process. Once you have your dough on your dusted surface, it's now time to cut it into the sizes you want your loaves to be before you start the shaping process. So here I am just stretching and folding the dough back over itself, basically tucking it into a relatively neatly folded square. Once that's done, I turn it on the diagonal and then do a crisscross type of fold with small little folds across the bottom, almost making a seam run down the length of the dough, and then roll it up into a relatively tight little ball. I like to dust my hands at this point to make sure that I don't get too much dough sticking to them, and then just pull the dough on the surface of the counter toward myself. The surface tension of the counter will just pull the dough underneath, rolling it into the shape that we're looking for. I'm not overworking the dough at this point, but once we have our shape, it's now ready to go into the proving basket. So I grab the dough gently with my hands, turn it upside down and drop it into a well-floured proving basket. As I say, if you don't have a proving basket at this point, just cover a Pyrex dish or something with a dish towel. Generously coat the dish towel in a dusting of flour and drop the sourdough onto the dish towel. It's important to drop it in upside down at this point so the seam is facing up. It's now time to put it in the fridge to let it rest overnight, anywhere between 8 and 24 hours. Here's an example of a white bread flour dough that I've made. As you can see, it's substantially wetter than the brown flour. It's also a lot stickier and quite a little bit more difficult to manage. So for this, what I like to use is a baking scraper, which so I fold it using the baking scraper because the flour doesn't stick as much to the baking scraper as it does to my hand. And once I've folded it, all I do is I use the baking scraper to then just pull it on the surface and give it a little bit of a turn so that the surface tension again just pulls the dough underneath it, forming it into a nice round shape which I can use. Then again, flip it upside down, drop it into a bowl or a proving basket and let it rest in the fridge for 8 to 24 hours. So in summary, my process is a relatively simple one. Once I've established my quantities, I then mix my sourdough starter with my water. Once that is mixed, I add my flour. I then leave my flour to stand for 30 to 45 minutes for the gluten to develop. Then I mix in the salt with a splash of water, and it's time for the first prove, which is going to be 3.5 hours, intermittently stretching and folding with probably 45-minute intervals. Once your first prove is finished, it's time to shape your dough and get it into your proving baskets. Once that's happened, leave it in the fridge overnight for the second prove. It's a good idea to take your dough out of the fridge about 2 hours before you're looking at actually baking it, just so that it can get back down to room temperature. My dough's at room temperature and I've got my oven up to temperature. I've set my oven as hot as I can possibly set it. I'm now just taking the handle off a cast iron pot that I have. I'll be baking my loaf in a cast iron baking pot for the first 25 minutes of the cook. This way it'll retain all the steam and moisture within the loaf to allow it to rise and get that light, airy inside that you really want in a sourdough loaf. So I just popped down a little piece of folded aluminium foil to cover the hole where the handle for the pot lid was. I'll now take my dough out and turn it upside down onto my pot lid and gently remove the tea towel. Once I've got the tea towel off, a little gentle wriggle gets my dough back into the position that I want it, and it's time to score the top of the loaf. Scoring the dough with a blade or a sharp knife will allow the bread to expand during baking. The purpose is primarily to control the direction in which the bread will expand. It's also here where you have a little bit of creativity and can make different patterns and choices on top of your bread. Single motion cuts with a sharp blade do the best job. A little bit hesitant here, I wasn't really sure how I was going to go about it. I didn't plan this at all, but it worked out really well. So now my bread is scored and ready to go into the hot oven. I'll put the bottom onto my top lid, closing it and capturing all the steam, and I'll put it into my oven, which is at 260 degrees at the moment, and I'll leave it in there for 25 minutes with the top on. I like to drop a splash of boiling water into a baking tray underneath, which creates extra steam and heat in the oven. 25 minutes later, I remove the bottom of the pot, exposing the bread to firm up and get the crisp crust that you're looking for on a sourdough loaf. So there you have the final product. The patterns on the bottom loaf are from the proving basket. They are aesthetically pleasing but make absolutely no other difference. The top two loaves have been proved in an ordinary bowl with a tea towel, and they taste exactly the same. Apparently you're not supposed to cut a warm loaf of sourdough bread, but I dare you to try. It's incredibly difficult not to eat this delicious loaf of bread warm with just a dollop of butter on. As you can see, the inside of the loaf is light and airy. The majority of that lightness and airiness comes from a lack of over kneading and over manipulating your dough. Just a couple of stretches and folds and a little bit of shaping, pre-shaping and final shaping will get you that light, airy dough feel with a nice crispy crust. It really is a simple process. Unfortunately, it is a long process, and it's a very rewarding process. So give it a bash. I hope it is successful for you. Let me know in the comments. I'd be very, very interested to hear. If you found this video interesting, please subscribe and share. I do use this platform for my business as well, and could use all the exposure I can get at the moment. Thank you. Until next time, take care of yourselves and be safe out there.